Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're investigating a very serious, silent threat operating right under our noses. We're looking at a foundational module on stress management, but listen, we aren't going to talk about it in the usual cliché ways. We're not just talking about having a bad day at the office or feeling a little overwhelmed in traffic. Based on our source material, we're approaching this with the seriousness of a detective profiling a suspect. We're tracking the silent, chronic flooding of cortisol and adrenaline that literally breaks down our bodies over time. We're going to unpack the actual biological mechanics, the patterns, and the ultimate dangers of this hidden adversary, to map out exactly how it infiltrates our daily lives.
Now, the exact chilling phrasing, pulled directly from our source material, calls this the hidden killer within us. Think about that for a second. The authors are deliberately framing our topic today not as a minor inconvenience or, just a normal byproduct of modern life, but as an unidentified suspect we urgently need to profile. By calling it a hidden killer, the text forces us to basically strip away our complacency. We tend to wear our busy, frantic lives as badges of honor, right? But this source demands we look at the reality of what that constant pressure is actually doing. We totally ignore how this chronic state creates a silent, low-grade inflammation that secretly damages our cardiovascular system over time. So before we lay out the evidence and the sheer mechanics of how this works, I want you to look at your own life. Have you been harboring this fugitive without even realizing it? Seriously, have you accepted a racing heart, persistent digestive issues, or chronic brain fog as just standard quirks of adulthood? Have you normalized feeling completely drained by 2 p.m. every day? Because this explainer is designed to help you recognize that those aren't just personality traits. Those are the tangible signs of your nervous system being under active siege, and we need to identify exactly what's launching that attack.
Let's start with part 1, the culprit, the fundamentals of stress. The initial phase of the source module requires participants to understand these fundamentals, establishing a grounded baseline of what stress actually is. Because it's not just a passing feeling, it's a profound, cascading physiological response. When we talk about the fundamentals of stress, we're talking about your body's sympathetic nervous system, that famous fight-or-flight response. The source indicates that before you can manage your well-being, you really have to comprehend this internal operation. Biologically, your amygdala, which is your brain's emotional processing center, perceives a threat and sends a rapid-fire distress signal straight to the hypothalamus. This immediately triggers the release of adrenaline and cortisol into your bloodstream. Your heart rate violently increases, your breathing quickens, and blood flow is actively redirected away from non-essential functions like digestion and your immune response, pushing it all toward your muscles. And the crazy part? This happens long before you even consciously realize you're stressed.
Moving on to part 2, the MO, which is all about identifying your stressors.
Think deeply about what triggers your hidden killer. Ask yourself what specific environments, relationships, or situations act as an open invitation for this threat. The source material makes it clear that stress doesn't just materialize out of thin air. It's triggered by specific catalysts. And hey, these often aren't massive life events. We have to look at micro-stressors. The tiny, relentless daily triggers. A constantly buzzing phone, a vague, passive-aggressive email from a coworker, or just the background anxiety of financial uncertainty. These micro-stressors keep our nervous systems locked in a state of high alert. To stop the killer, you first have to know what's unlocking the door for it.
The source notes that participants must actively learn to identify these stressors, essentially learning to spot the specific traps. This is a deliberate multi-step process, pinpointing the exact stressors, recognizing environmental invitations, and understanding what actually initiates the attack. But why does this process work? Well, psychologically, when you name the exact things setting you off, you actually shift the processing of that threat away from the emotional center of the brain, that amygdala we talked about, and move it right into the prefrontal cortex, which handles logic and reasoning. So by simply identifying and categorizing the trigger, you're biologically regaining control and calming the neurological alarm system. You literally cannot manage what you haven't clearly identified.
Which brings us to part 3, the footprints, or the symptoms of stress.
The module focuses on understanding these symptoms of stress, treating them as vital warning signs that the culprit is active and currently doing damage. We're tracking the evidence. The source emphasizes understanding these symptoms not as isolated, random annoyances, but as direct physical and mental footprints of stress. And there's a biological why behind every single one. Take a tense jaw, for example. That's not just an irritating habit. That's your body physically bracing its musculature for a physical attack that isn't actually coming. Or consider restless nights and insomnia. This happens because those elevated cortisol levels we discussed are actively suppressing your brain's production of melatonin, which is the hormone you absolutely need to sleep. Your body is leaving you a trail of vital biological clues. The question is, are you paying attention to them, or are you just sweeping them under the rug?
And now we hit the most critical piece, Section 4, the damage and the ultimate health impact. The source material leaves zero room for ambiguity here, explicitly stating that understanding the impact of stress on our health is the absolute most important takeaway of the entire foundational module. They don't just say it's helpful to know, they emphasize it as the core necessity. Why? Because until we understand the severe physiological damage that unchecked stress inflicts, we just won't take the necessary steps to arrest it. We are talking about concrete structural damage here. Chronic stress consistently elevates blood pressure, leading directly to hypertension. It aggressively increases the risk of metabolic syndrome. It actively suppresses the immune system's ability to create lymphocytes, leaving you highly vulnerable to actual pathogens and viruses.
This step-by-step breakdown maps out a concept in medical science known as allostatic load, which is just a fancy way of describing the cumulative wear and tear on your body as it's exposed to repeated chronic stress. In step 1, the stressor is identified. This is your acute stress phase, where the trigger is pulled. In step 2, the symptoms manifest. This is the chronic activation phase, where physical footprints like insomnia and muscle tension are left behind. And if those initial steps are consistently ignored, well, it inevitably leads to step 3, allostatic overload, resulting in serious disease where your fundamental health is impacted. It's a direct, undeniable pipeline from a stressful environment right to physical illness.
We have to deeply weigh the danger of treating these warning symptoms as everyday annoyances against the severe reality of their ultimate health impact. Think about it. When we brush off the tension headaches, when we push through that creeping anxiety, or when we just pound 3 more cups of coffee to fight off the relentless fatigue, we don't actually make the stress disappear. The source module warns us that ignoring the initial symptoms simply forces the stress to mutate. Ignored functional symptoms inevitably transform into actual, structural, chronic health impacts. By unmasking this process, this explainer shifts our perspective from simply dealing with it to actively protecting our biology from a known, highly destructive threat.
So, since we've successfully unmasked the foundations, the biological triggers, the symptoms, and the ultimate impacts of stress based on this incredibly powerful module, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought. Now that you know exactly how this hidden killer operates within you, what specific stressor will you identify, and what physical footprint will you monitor tomorrow to stop this killer in its tracks? You have the biological profile. You know its exact MO. The next move in protecting your health is entirely up to you.